Hi, and welcome everyone to Cape Ann ARTWaves, a new weekly program dedicated to having insightful discussions with talented artists and makers who hail from Cape Ann and beyond. I'm Kristine Fisher, fellow artist, cultural champion, and this program's co-host. Jackie Ganem DeFalco will be hosting next week. My guest today is the lovely Beth Williams. Beth has been designing and making elegant contemporary glass jewelry for over 35 years in her working studio here in Gloucester. Beth is very involved with the arts community here on Cape Ann. And I like to say that walking into Beth's working studio is like being greeted, honestly, by a symphony of color. It's absolutely an exquisite experience. So on that note, let's flip this over to you, Beth. I'd love to hear, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear, how do you describe your work?
Well, first of all, Chris, thank you for having me. Thank you for
welcome
to the 1623 studios. My work, as you said, is quite contemporary, very colorful. I try to make it very wearable. It may be movable, kinetic, but it's fun and playful.
Yeah,
and,
you bet.
and fun to wear.
And very joyful. I've said that to you before, but that's always the descriptor that I have when I think about your work.
Oh, thank you.
So talk to us about some of your inspirations. Because your colors are so dreamy, and where does all that come from?
Most of it comes from my garden and from inspiration from here, from where we live. It's beautiful here. And the natural world is a big part of my inspiration, which is actually why I launched my online studio on Earth Day on April 22nd.
Hey, how wonderful is that? I didn't realize that. That's very serendipitous to me. So that leads us right in. I want to talk about your photography, but I'm going to save that for our next discussion. I want to learn now, how have you been using this time? It's been a kind of a pregnant pause for all of us. So tell us what you've been up to. I know you've been really busy.
Well, the first month or so, I just sort of moped. It was hard to take that break and not be part of my regular schedule. But then, because everything shut down, all my quote unquote faucets of income shut right off. Yeah. I decided I needed to try and find another way to get my work out there. And I decided to design and launch an online virtual studio. It took me about 3 weeks and it's up.
Only 3 weeks, Beth. I mean, think about it. I mean, to me, that is so impressive. I've been on your online studio store, and I just find it to be so beautifully organized, so beautifully presented, and for me, as a buyer, a real tease. So well done. Well done. Talk to us a little bit about some of the steps that were involved.
Well, first of all, I had to go into my real store and pack up everything that I thought I might be using, and bring it home, set up a little photography studio in my living room.
Right.
I have my storage area and my shipping area all spread out in my living room. And it's become my workspace away from home.
Yeah. So what does your husband think about this?
Well, luckily he has a space that he calls his too.
Oh, good. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. You've taken over.
So doing the photography, figuring that out was the toughest part at first. Glass is hard to photograph. Yeah. But I was able to, I have a beautiful picture window facing the river, and I get the north light that way. So I was able to diffuse it by putting a piece of vellum up on the window and photographing on that, and it worked really well.
I have to say your photography is exquisite. I mean, you do such a good job. And as you know, I thought maybe you had somebody else, a quote unquote professional photographer doing your work. You really have an excellent eye, which is, no surprise, but you have a beautiful way of actually executing the photographs.
Thank you. It's amazing what the new iPhone, well, it's not even a new one. It's an older iPhone, but what the cameras can do on those phones once you really delve in and start looking at how best to use it.
Right, how you can leverage it. Yeah, you bet. Mm-hmm. So, Beth, if we just kind of jump a little bit, I know that you are very strategic in the way that you go to market. and you have some wonderful relationships, key relationships with highly regarded institutions like the PEM and the Fuller Museum and various galleries. Talk to us about your approach.
Well, to get my work in places other than my own studio, I try to develop a relationship with the people who run them, or at least the buyers, so that they're invested with that personal feeling and relationship.
Right.
I think it's one of the most important things you can do, even if you don't live in the same area, just by picking up the phone, trying to do it so that you're not imposing on their time. I usually email ahead of time and ask for a phone appointment and talk to them that way. But most of the places I have been to or I have been recommended to through a mutual friend.
So it sounds to me like do your research and really kind of follow your gut too.
Absolutely.
In terms of building that trust. Yeah.
Otherwise, your stuff could be sitting in a drawer somewhere and never see the light of day.
Right. Yeah, good point. Well, let's shift gears and talk a little bit about your process, because your work is so beautifully nuanced to me. You know, we've already talked about the gorgeous colors that you work with. Talk to us about your favorite tools.
Well, I couldn't do my work without A, the camera.
Right, yeah.
B, my torch.
Yeah.
I use a torch that mixes oxygen and propane to melt the glass. And I have a few specialty tools that I use as well. But I don't really need a lot of tools. Really, the fire is the big thing that I couldn't work without. And I have the studio set up so that people can come in and see me when we're open, of course.
I love it. Perfect segue, because I've always been so fascinated by the fact that you're able to balance it all. In other words, I think of creating work as more of a internal journey. And yet, you know, I've seen you so many times at your workbench in your working studio and, you know, in iPop or in another customer pop. So I love the fact that you're able to balance it. Can you talk a little bit about how you go about that? Because again, you're strategic about how you do that.
Well, I am. If I'm expecting people or I'm open for the afternoon, I'll usually make beads that are relatively simple and quick, so that if somebody comes in, my kiln is right there. I can just finish up what I'm doing, pop it in the kiln, and it's good to go. Yeah. If I'm working on more intricate designs, I tend to do those on days when either I'm not open to the public or it's in the evening or a time when it's terrible weather outside and nobody's going to come in.
That makes perfect sense. I love it. Well, you know, that translates so beautifully, I feel, to your online store. It's really, I mean, your work is just splendid. Can you talk to us a little bit about your incentive? I know you've got a very special opportunity going on.
Well, until May 20th, which would be a month from the day that I opened, I'm donating 25% of all the sales that I do on the online store to the Essex County Artist Fund to help other self-employed artists who may or may not have any kind of a backup plan, and who are struggling like so many of us this time of year. I mean, this time of the world.
I love it. And that extends to gift certificates too, right?
It does. It covers everything that comes in from the online, the virtual studio.
That's great. That's great, Beth. Well, I want to ask you, what's next for you? It sounds to me like what's next is just following up with this whole new initiative.
It is. I'm still trying to figure out how things will balance out once we can reopen again.
Yeah.
Do I sort of keep two stores going, an online store and my real store, my brick and mortar?
Right.
So there are things to figure out with that. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep going with the virtual store. If anybody's interested, it's bethwilliams.com. And if you'd like to sign up for my e-blast, I don't send many out, but they are helpful because it'll tell you when I've got new work going up, or I will be sending one out right after the 20th with an announcement as to how much I've raised for the fund.
Excellent. So, that's great, Beth. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to close out with a lovely slide that also reflects your URL. So that'll be very visible. So I want to thank you today. What a pleasure to talk to you. It's always great to see you, my friend.
Thank you, Chris. It's good to see you too. Yeah. I look forward to when we can get together for breakfast or lunch sometime soon.
Likewise, likewise. For our viewers, I want to indicate that this interview can be seen on 1623's social media platforms to include YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Channel 12. So thank you so much. I'm Kristine Fisher signing off. Looking forward to talking to you next time. Stay well, everyone.